Thank you very much for joining us here. You're watching Business at 9. I'm Nivedna Prabhu. Our top focus, in fact, is about how Indian auto majors announced discounts clearly ahead of the festive season. In fact, the discounts range from 25,000 and go up to 2 lakhs as well. But there are, of course, key drivers for the cuts. And in terms of how the festive season is expected to shape up as well, that remains to be seen as well. But let me go across to my guest joining me this evening to really get a perspective as to what she's making of that. Renuka Kirpulani, consulting editor, Autocar India and editor, Auto Mashable India. Renuka, thank you very much for taking the time out. Pleasure to be joined by you on the show this evening. In fact, talking about what we're looking at here, essentially, Renuka, given the timing of it and the festive season as well, looking at the numbers, in fact, very interestingly, the ranging from 2 lakh on the Innova, 50,000 on the Alto. Is this a genuine consumer bonanza or a sign that manufacturers are clearing the decks for bigger shifts this year? Because some models are getting deep cuts of over a lakh, while others, have barely any festive offers. What does this say about demand pockets and supply chain realities as well?
Thank you, Nivedna, for having me. My pleasure to be here. I think basically, this entire year for the automotive market has been a little slower than before. I think a lot of economic reasons around this, pockets are tighter. And for that, it is basically the economic status in the country, geopolitical reasons for that, and a lot of uncertainty around in many, many areas. Another thing that has dampened buying sentiment at the moment is this whole confusion about diesel, ethanol. It's just adding, and if I may say that, more fuel to the fire, where people are just not sure. So they're holding on to their buys. And, so buying sentiment has been very weak in general. Of course, the festive season is coming up, so leading up to that, dealers have so much stock, and when they have stock, it's just very high interest rates for them, so it's better for them to clear the stock and offer good discounts. So in my sense, this is the best time for a consumer, because it's a bonanza of discounts everywhere. And I think say for one or two models, like literally every model has some sort of discount happening at this point of time. So I think it's a great time for consumers in the market.
Taking a cue from what you said, given how it's fueling these discounts as well, and absolutely right. But, Renuka, for someone like you, who has covered the industry for decades, what's the most striking change you've actually seen in what drives a car purchase? Is it still price first, or are factors like tech and brand image overtaken, and more so during festive deals?
I think the Indian consumer has evolved a lot. I think the biggest changes that I see are now that, the value where what you're saying is price. It's no longer price. People will pay a higher price point to get more tech and more features in their car. So for them, value has changed in that sense. So I think that is the biggest change that I've seen. They want the safety features, they want the convenience features, and they want their car to be tech laden, and they don't mind paying a price point for that. Most manufacturers are selling top end variants of cars. So people will walk into when they hear that base price point, but they'll end up buying the top end car, and that's the change that we're seeing. Also the buying price that we're seeing, originally you saw, Alto was one of the highest selling car. Now you see that has moved up, so it's like Brezza and the Desire that are taking over. So the entire buying price bracket has gone up as well.
Why do you think that is, Renuka, in terms of the numbers that you just put into perspective?
Well, it was, the economy was in a good mood. It was a happy sentiment, and I think the middle class in India has evolved. It has become larger, and I think post COVID, a lot more people also wanted their own mode of transport. So that kind of revived the buying of cars as well. So there were a lot of reasons for that. Also, I think the entire earning strata bracket, everything has moved up a bit, and I think for that reason we see even the car buying value move up a bit. Finance is easier available, so I think there are a lot of reasons for that.
The other aspect is something that, getting your talking points about that as well. For someone perhaps torn between a big discount outgoing model and a soon to launch next generation version, what's your checklist? who's driven like by both. And what's the one pitfall buyers often miss during a high discount season? Something only an insider like you would flag, and I'm sure our viewers would want to understand that as well.
I definitely look at whether it's going to be an entire model change. Is it going to be just a refresh? So that I think is the key thing to look at, because people announce the word new is very freely used these days, and there's barely one or two feature changes, which in a larger sense may or may not make a difference to you. People like to hear that this feature is in the car, for example ADAS, but how many people really use it in real terms? So you have to see whether you're going to really use that feature, whether waiting and spending more would be worth it. So I think that is the key thing to look at, when you're buying a car, because you can get some really, really great deals on outgoing models. And remember, the outgoing model was also new at one time with a lot of things and technology. And these days, the changes are really minimal. So it's really not a bad option to buy an outgoing model.
Talking about that, and given the aspect of what we're seeing in terms of offers, and which has also changed over the years, we're given to understand this year's offers go beyond price, longer warranties, you're looking at free accessories, buyback guarantees. Are these, in your opinion, proving more effective than cash discounts and closing deals, Renuka?
I think, they're drivers to bring people into the showroom. Um, the sentiment has been low, as I said, and people, dealers want people to come into the showrooms and see cars. Once again, I say this, and I say this, people will come in with the attraction of a lot of things, and then eventually they'll end up buying a top end variant with all the bells and whistles and everything in it. So that is the way it goes. So I think the idea is to have all these things out there to draw people into the showrooms. But I think, yes, warranties are very, very important, because the Indian consumer is very particular about after sales. A lot of products have tanked because they don't have great after sales. A lot of brands have tanked because they don't have great after sales. So that is a very important part of the Indian consumer's buying sentiment. And so when you're offering greater warranties, it's definitely a driver for a person to come in and buy a car if he's sitting on the fence.
Talking about the consumer spirit as well, is there a festive buying trend this year that has surprised you, perhaps? Whether it's either in terms of consumer behavior or industry strategy as well?
Well, nothing really surprising at the moment. I think consumers are holding on. At the moment, there really isn't much happening. Consumers are very, very worried about this whole ethanol, that's come up in discussion. People are worried about whether they should buy an EV, whether they should. There are too many changes in the market. There's too much happening. And I think that's confusing buyers. So that is the sentiment that I'm seeing, that most buyers are confused and saying, should I hold on?
That's an interesting point that you make, given what you're looking at, absolutely, an important point, even for something like a Delhi NCR market, given that's that other conversation of the end of life vehicles as well, how that's going to pan out. How does one really read between the lines, Renuka?
Unfortunately, policy in our country is not long term. It's subject to change, and it keeps changing. And we see a lot of nuances in these policies. One day we announce this, one day we announce that. So I think stability of policy is really, really necessary to drive that sentiment up again. We keep coming up with newer things. At one point we were on a trajectory to full EV. Now we're not on a trajectory to full EV. So we need some kind of clarity. I think the entire automotive industry needs clarity, because even making automobiles or making changes is a long lead thing. Manufacturers themselves cannot make changes so quickly. And don't forget, all of these things also drive prices up. So there are a lot of factors at play with a lot of change. There's a lot of tumult in the industry in many, many ways. And I think once you see that stabilize, then things will become more stable again.
So there's clearly ambiguity, and of course there's clarity in terms of policy, which makes it all the more difficult. But while purchasing it now, given how you put that into perspective earlier, with that confusion as well, or perhaps a grey space, is it okay to say that maybe buying a car now is not like what it used to be before? You might be fearful of how policy changes might also happen.
Most definitely. I think most people are worried. But I would still tell consumers this is a great time to throw out that worry and go out and buy a car, because you can't get a better deal than now. So, if you're sitting on the fence, make those decisions, because you've got some great discounts happening. And let's put it this way, that, I mean, whether we like it or not, internal combustion engines are here to stay for a while. If you have a charger at home or in the office and you have short distances, then an EV makes great sense to buy. So, figure out your driving pattern, figure out your requirements, and then buy that car now, because it's a great time to get one.
Talking about great cars to buy, or perhaps the timing of it, but just circling back to what we're looking at in terms of the festive trends, from the Maruti 800 to the Innova Hycross, you've covered cars that became cultural icons as well. So going back to the point that you made about what the future is looking like as well, electric and a mix of all of that, how do you believe that's going to really go forward with these loopholes and challenges as well? Something entirely different?
Well, I think we're going to see a mix of things in the Indian market. You've seen Maruti and Toyota come in with hybrids. They're doing quite strongly for them. So I think we are going to see more hybrids come in to the Indian market. That's definitely the middle path and middle ground to go. And ultimately they are good, because they save on fuel. They're cleaner for the environment. So it's good all around for consumer, for the environment, for everything. So I think we will see more hybrids come in the future. EVs are here, there's no doubt about it. And you see every manufacturer literally, in the fray for an EV. You see a lot of them coming up as well. And like I said, EVs serve, if you have, your city commuter, and an EV is just so easy to drive. It's light on the wallet. So there's lots of advantages to EVs as well. I think, mainly a consumer has to see what their usage pattern is, what their needs and requirements are. And that's when you go out and buy a car. Most people will say, which is the best car for me to buy in this budget? And I always answer saying, okay, what's your usage pattern and what are your requirements? Because I may recommend one thing to someone, but I will recommend something entirely different to another person. So it just depends on that. And I think everyone has to buy a car for their usage, right?
On a lighter note, Renuka, what would you recommend to someone who lives in a city like Bengaluru, where the traffic is, of course, all the time debatable?
Buy a car that you don't need to use your left foot or the clutch for. Don't buy a manual, buy the automatic for sure. And why not buy the EV? Because Bengaluru really has great charging infrastructure. And with the amount of time you're going to be spending in your commute, be saving a lot of fuel by buying an EV.
And also great weather, right? Just adding that in. But Renuka, talking
Well,
about the festive
schemes
also
right
that is happening, we're given.
Sorry.
Absolutely, yeah. I think right. No. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, with the great weather, they can buy the convertible and go the other end of the spectrum if they're looking at high-end cars.
Yeah, that's perhaps a cue that our viewers can take. But, circling back, Renuka, to the festive schemes aspect that we have been discussing in length, we're given to understand, which is interesting as well, that the used car space is also running festive schemes now. Do you see this cannibalizing new car sales or expanding the overall pie?
I think it will expand the overall buy. I don't think it will really cannibalize. There are some people who just want a new car, they feel safer with it. And there are some people who realize that you'll get some great deals in the second-hand and used car market, or people who want to buy a segment above and don't have the budget. So, for them, a used car makes more sense. And these days, you're getting a variety of used cars that come with an assurance, that come with, backing of the car being thoroughly checked. So it's not like, the original days where you had one single dealer and you didn't know what you were buying into. I think there's the guarantee of a company behind the used cars as well. So I think the used car market is expanding, and you can get some fantastic deals, especially for people who aspire for luxury badges and can't afford them. You get some fantastic deals, or like even the Innova Hycross, you get some fantastic deals in the used car market.
All right, so perhaps that's a cue for all our viewers looking to, of course, trade their bets on what's happening this festive season. But Renuka, an absolute pleasure to be having you in conversation with us evening. Thank you very much for, in fact, joining us, sharing with us your insights, and overall, of course, telling our viewers as to what they can look forward to. But for the moment, we leave the conversation at that, Renuka. We're also slipping into a quick break here on Business at 9. Stay with us. Lots more coming up on the other side.